Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Bites. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. Our guest today, Charles Clay, is an inner peace coach and healer, neurokinetic pain relief specialist, creator of freedom from pain and the inner peace process for self-healing trauma and bringing more dreams to life. Charles has an extensive background in kinesiology and natural healing modalities. In 2008, he experienced a devastating back injury while snowboarding. He was told by doctors that he would need to undergo surgery or he may never move the same again. Despite doctors' orders, Charles was able to heal himself naturally without surgery. Since then, he has helped countless entrepreneurs and hardworking professionals heal themselves naturally from low energy levels, anxiety disorders, physical and emotional pain, and healing their childhood trauma to become their own therapists and allow more dreams to come true with his guided support and inner peace process. Charles, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. That story of your snowboarding accident reminds me of Dr. Joe Dispenza's bicycle accident where he defied doctor's orders and managed
A lot
to
of parallels there for sure.
yeah.
It's another testament to pain as a great teacher, and always informing us of what wants to change, and that these can lead to blessings, and lessons that were important for us to learn on our initiations with pain.
Yeah. And like, I've got that on my list of questions to talk to you about is that acronym PAIN. So you might as well go straight into it now. Like, did you come up with that acronym or did you read it somewhere or heard it?
I wish I remembered where I heard it first. So I've just been borrowing it, but it resonates deeply because we have been taught and conditioned in our society to avoid pain by all means necessary, right? It's like something's painful, it's like hurry, seek pleasure, get in a scroll hole on Instagram, on social media, seeking dopamine, or look for liquid anesthesia or a smoke or some pills, anything externally to try to get away from pain. Whereas that acronym really resonated with me because pain stands for pay attention inward now. And it's the opposite of trying to avoid it. It's actually taking a look at it and, even finding compassion and appreciation for, this intelligence in these sensory suits that we call human bodies. The fact that they're always giving us information and messages, whether we're paying attention or not. And so, we can listen to the feather of, hey, something needs to change. There's a little universal guidance to, you might want to shift that or improve your relationship with that substance or whatever that may be. If we don't pay attention to the feather, it's like the equivalent of getting hit in the head with a brick. That's another wake up call. It might be a bad hangover or something, and then we're dealing with our own consequences of our own actions. And then if we really don't change things after that, it's usually like the equivalent of like a Mack truck, getting hit, or we end up in the hospital, or these kind of things that are monumental shifts in our life that occur. And I like to pay attention to the feathers after learning the hard way myself. I pay close attention to the feathers now and appreciate, the messages from my body and honor those.
Yeah. So I can relate. Like a couple of years ago, I was in a bit of a state of seeking things, and I very emotionally driving along in the car one day cried out to the universe, not angry at the universe, but I was very emotional, and I was like, send me this, like da da da. And within a day or two, what I'd screamed out for dropped in my lap, and it was just there, and all I needed to do was just push the button and drop some cash, and I had what I wanted. And I was like, yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah. And it was just so obvious that my answer had arrived. And it was it was late summer, and I went down the beach real early one
that morning, and I was sort of looking up and down the beach, and it was really quiet. There was no one for like hundreds of meters, or like 500,000 feet. There was just no one around, and the waves were small. They were just like 2 foot, and I thought, oh, I'll go for a quick swim. And out I go, and I caught one or two little waves in, and of course I'm thinking about this thing the whole time. And then I catch a third small little 2 foot wave, and all of a sudden it had like double, triple the intensity of the others, and it just dived me into the sand. And as the top of my head smashed into the sand, I heard this crack in my neck, and I was like, like, am I actually going to be able to stand up? Am I paralyzed? And I just knew instantly, like, wake up, Doug, you idiot. Like, you're not being punished, but you're being whacked over the head with the brick. And I sort of got onto my knees, and I'm thinking, yeah. And because I'm very slowly looking around up and down the beach, and there's nobody. And I'm only in a foot of water with small waves. And I get up. I think I'm just going to make it up to my towel. And then I got to my towel, and I was doing okay. And I just picked it up and kept walking to the car, because at the car there were people around, and I was like, in case I suddenly dropped out. But I got off fine. I just had some gravel rash on top of my head, and got over that, and sort of quickly, within a short time after that, acted on what I had screamed out for that had arrived. And
What
yeah,
was the message that came through for you?
the mess. Well, it was whether I was to undertake this particular program. Like I was crying out for. I was trying. It was all about intuition. I had. I was having intuitive messages come through fairly strong, but I couldn't understand or interpret them. And I cried out, send me someone to teach me how to interpret my intuition. And I didn't know what that meant, what the answer to that was, because that's why I was crying out for help. And the answer had arrived loud and clear. And I was hesitating for many reasons. And it was scary. It was like, oh shit, this is it. Like, yeah. And
Was that someone you, or
no, it
or
was somebody. It was
yeah,
it was an intuitive coaching academy. Like, it was a life
yeah,
coaching academy, but with half of the training was intuition. And it was like,
beautiful.
yeah, here we go. Like, we're there. But it was scary. It was like a year program. It was a lot of money. And it was like, if I do undertake this and I outlay all that, I'm really going to have to follow through now, because, you know,
Mhm.
yeah, I've got to recoup what this big expense, etc. And yeah,
Yeah, you invest in yourself, and when you're paying, you pay attention.
yes,
Right?
I did. Well, mate, it was the online classes were in Florida, and so I was getting up at like 3 a.m. A couple of times a week to attend. Everyone else is sort of sitting there at 9 a.m., 11 a.m. their time, and I'm sort of like bleary eyed, and
Commitment.
it was funny. Like, the first half of the class, they might go around and who's got a comment, who's got a question, and I'm sort of still waking up. And then sort of the last 15 minutes, I was alive and fired up, and I always made the classes go longer than they should have, because I was suddenly active. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So that phenomenon is always occurring, and they've proven it in science. It's are you familiar with the reticular activation system?
I've heard the term, but no, please tell us.
Yeah, it's a phenomenon. It's always occurring. It's actually a space in our brain that's always filtering the thousands and thousands of stimuli that are coming in every moment to actually what's important or what's interesting to us. Right? There's a filtration system in our mind. Otherwise, it would just be fully overloaded with all the stimuli, right? So it's cool because understanding this, you can use it to your advantage, like you did. You can use intention to set your reticular activation to what it is you want to call in or experience. And that's a game changer, because then your mind is working for you. Reticular activation, meaning retina, the lens at which we see our reality through, is activated to that which we're interested in or calling in, right? And this is much more effective and beneficial than going into our default state with the mind, which is the typical negative thought patterns, right? That we're used to, that kind of downward spiral. And, an example of that would be you wake up in the morning, didn't get a good night's sleep. So it's like we declare to ourselves or identify with that thought, man, it's going to be a rough day. As soon as we declare that, even just think that and identify with it, we've just set our reticular activation system to finding evidence of that being true. And the universe will provide, right? Like you stub your toe, getting out of bed, you spill your coffee. If you're ungrounded, it's somebody stealing your parking spot. Like these things keep showing up in your experience because that's what we've set our mind to. So what's great is that it's like, thanks for the contrast. What is it that I do want to experience more of? I want to improve my intuition. So that is what sets intention, sets that reticular activation to, it's like using your mind as a Labrador dog playing fetch. When you keep it occupied on something positive, then it's not digging holes in the backyard, and getting into those negative default programs. So it can be like a heat seeking missile to what it is we ultimately want to experience. And what a great way to use the mind as an instrument of the heart.
Yeah, make it helpful for a change instead of how it has been for most of our lives. It's we don't realize, like you're saying. And is that the same phenomena where you suddenly decide to buy a new red car, and now all of a sudden you see every 3 minutes you see exactly that car you're thinking of buying, but you hadn't seen one ever before. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, I want that new red Tesla in that color with those rims, and I'm gonna be the only one on the road with that. And as soon as that, sets your reticular activation, then it's like you start seeing them in magazines. One pulls up next to you, like you start seeing them everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's not that they weren't there before; it's just that now it's on your reticular activation. So it's good phenomenon to use in our advantage.
So it's almost like we can only see so many things, and
Yep.
now we're choosing to see it. And if we wake up grumpy and kick the cat, we're
Right.
choosing to see things that are not going to make our day so pleasant.
Right.
When that,
And you're seeing, yeah, and then you're seeing through a lens of maybe some unresolved or repressed anger or whatever, frustration, right? So then you're going to see things that trigger that throughout the day,
wow, that
right?
takes it down. When you talk about they're seeing through the lens, it's like we've got thousands of lenses that we're going to connect to our eyes when we wake up in the morning, and we just choose which one we're going to look through. And
Consciously choosing is a huge elevation in your human experience, because just as simple as waking up in the morning and taking some deep breaths of gratitude, because they've discovered that, studies have shown that individual groups, they studied their DNA, at a molecular level. They were able to watch their DNA as they had an intention setting group, right? And there wasn't a ton of change in the DNA. And they had another group that was just focused on elevated state of emotion, right? Like gratitude, and not a ton of change in their DNA as well. But when they combined the two, it was like witnessing magic. When they combined a heightened state of emotion with a crystal clear intention, their DNA started unraveling in real time, and different genes were turning on, almost showing us like you're opening up to the quantum field of possibilities, becoming more energy than matter. And that's what we can use on a daily basis to really set that reticular activation and use our mind as a beautiful instrument for calling in what it is we want to experience.
yeah, something you're just sparking all these things in my mind. So that I look at our bodies as an electrical system. So it's now what you just talked there about, like combining the two, and things changed a lot. It's like if you went back very old school, and I'm a fair bit older than you, my first car only had an AM radio in it. And now all of a sudden, like the community, has changed over. We now got FM, and all of a sudden I've now bought an FM radio and had it installed today, and I've got AM or FM. Like it's almost like we now have access to new information that we couldn't access before. And I don't know when color TV came in for you, but I would say you always had a color TV. When I was a kid, mate, we didn't get. I'm trying to think. I think the whole time I lived at home up until I was 20, we had a black and white TV. And color TV came in 1975 in Australia. I remember that. It was my last year of elementary school, but we certainly never got one. And our TV was so old, and the transistors and that crazy. We lived maybe 2 miles from the local hospital. They had paging systems back then, and we would often, watching television, get this funny paging sound through our TV, and we would hear the voice, Dr. Smith, report to Ward 14, code orange or something. It would come through our TV. That's how crazy the electrical things were back then, So then they fine-tuned it. They put different resistors or transistors or whatever in, so that wouldn't be picked up. So our TV was actually open to a little wider range of frequencies than it should have been, and we were getting messages we shouldn't have been hearing. And yeah, that's really interesting how, and then we can program what we hear and how and where. And I
Yeah,
want to even go back just a sec. I want you to talk about, you're talking about pain before, and that acronym, pay attention inward now. So what you're saying is pain is a level of intuition. And it's probably a level we don't necessarily enjoy, but had we listened earlier to the more subtle ones, does that sound right?
yeah, yes, it's an important message from our body. And I like to use the analogy, it's much like your car check engine light, right? And because most of us are pretty diligent, when check engine light comes on and it's blinking, like, wow, all right, I better make a change and get a service and make sure, we don't have a major breakdown. And so how come we're not that diligent when it comes to something way more intelligent, like our bodies, these sensory suits? And when we are, then we can begin to decipher and understand those messages much better, and then honor them and pay attention to the feathers instead of needing to get hit by a brick or a Mack truck to get the lessons and the blessings from it.
So I think for me, when the feather comes along and sends the message, I sort of like, it's really easy for me to fob it off and just like, oh, that was just me. That wasn't anything important, because it wasn't a bright light from the heavens. The clouds didn't part. Yeah, and I think this is what the message I'm trying to get across to men. Like it's like a still small voice that will not overpower you. It's subtle, and pay attention to those. Or like you say, sometimes these messages have to come through, like for our own safety, long term, or health, or whatever. And sometimes it does come to the brick on the back of the head,
Yeah.
which seems nasty, but it's actually being cruel to be kind long term.
And there's a practical way to tie all this in together that we're talking about, that even the listeners can utilize now or anytime they're experiencing a challenge, right? Or experiencing suffering. The quality of the questions that we ask greatly enhance the quality of our lives. And so by asking good questions, we can set our reticular activation and use our mind as a heat-seeking missile to receiving answers. And so I have 3 self-inquiry questions that I offer that are great for any time you're in a storm, you're in an emotional turmoil, life's throwing you curveballs, and it's coming in threes, and you're just going through a tough initiation. These 3 questions can help allow for more ease and grace and acceleration through that challenge to gaining, what you're supposed to from it. And the first question is, how is this happening for me? And this is an important one because, even if it's pain, you experience physical in your body, or an injury, how is this happening for me? And that is important because it's taking us out of victim mode, which is a typical route that our mind will go into. It's, can't believe this happened, it's somebody else's fault, or, why is this happening to me? That prolongs the experience of suffering anytime we're in victim mode. So we're pulling ourselves out of victim mode and taking some responsibility, knowing that there's something good can come from this, right? So how is that happening for me? Second one, what needs to change? what is it in my lifestyle, in my habits, in my, what is it that needs to change? That why is this signal coming up now? And catalyzing change in some regard. And then the third is, what are the lessons to learn and the blessings to earn from this experience, this initiation, this challenge? And when you look through that lens, even if the answers don't come instantaneously, just stay attuned, because they'll show up as little signs, synchronicities, and intuitive experiences will arise that are the answers to those questions. And it becomes really exciting, because then you realize, like, man, I don't need to stay in suffering any longer than necessary. I gained the lesson and the blessing from it, so now we can move on, and that probably doesn't have to reoccur in your experience, because nothing's more frustrating than we think we've healed something, or think we've been through this initiation, and yet keeps showing up in our experience. There's just more to learn there. There's more lessons and blessings to gain from it. So
yeah. That first one you're talking about, how is this happening for me? Whereas if you would go back a notch, that most people go, why is this happening to me? And it just, as soon as you said that, it was just like immediately I went back to, which lens did we connect on this morning when we woke up? We've got thousands of lenses that we can put on. Instead of putting your glasses on, you're putting these lenses on. And have we picked up the why is this happening to me lenses? And that's how we're going to look at the world today. Well, why is this happening for me? How is this going to benefit me? And I can't see right now. These lenses aren't making it obvious why it's happening for me. But I have the faith that as I keep looking around through the day, it's going to happen. Did you hear that, universe? You are going to show me. I've got the right lenses on today. I've selected them. Show me why this is happening for me. Oh, yeah, excellent. It's just, as you're saying these things, I've never thought exactly like this before. And it's great. It's just popping in.
yeah. And the lens at which we choose with intention can be enhanced with an elevated state of emotion. And what an easy way to elevate your state of emotion than with gratitude, right? So begin the practice. It's like you can come back to a gas station that fills your cup every day is gratitude. Even in the worst situations, there's things we can put our focus on that we're grateful for, and that can shift our vibration, right? It's like tuning into a different station, right? and instead of being stuck in AM, now you just tuned into like the coolest station on FM, and you're like, wow, I'm feeling better. This is great. And then you combine that with the crystal clear intention, which is, what is it that you want to feel, create, or experience, right? So that's fun, because then we're putting our greatest asset, our attention, and thus our energy, into something that's worthy of that, which is, what we ultimately want to experience as a soul. And that paves the path, because you're tuning into that station, by setting that intention. So I can give you a silly example. I don't know if you guys have it there in Australia as well, but people call this place the closest place to hell here in the States. And it's
Where
called
you live.
Yeah, the driver's license, where you have to go to get your driver's license. It's a government organization building, much like hospitals. Like, you can tell when you walk in, there's just a lower vibration. It's, if you're not conscious, it's easy to succumb to it. And then, like, everybody's walking around like zombies. It's like energy suck kind of atmosphere, right? So if you use this like I did, I was just testing this out when I first started playing with this principle, the reticular activation, gratitude and intention. So before I went to the DMV to renew my license, I sat in my car and breathed in all the things I felt grateful for. I'm grateful for my daughters that are healthy and vibrant, and we share laughs every day. I'm grateful for my car that got me here, and just getting my license so I can jump through the matrix hoops, so I can drive anywhere I want, play that game. And as soon as I filled up with that, I said, all right, since I'm going to the closest place to hell, I might as well have some fun there. So I wanted to have fun and share some laughs and some smiles with as many people that were open to it in the closest place to hell, the DMV. So I go in there, get my number, sit down, drop into a meditation. And when I came out of my meditation, there was a young gentleman sitting next to me, and he had a knee brace on. And I asked him, what happened, man? You kicking too much butt? And he goes, I wish. I had a, ACL surgery and I'm recovering. And I said, have you ever tried meditation for healing, to accelerate your healing? He's like, no. I said, man, I can share the same meditation that helped me get answers to healing naturally from my back injury snowboarding if you want. Then I shared that with him. And then next thing you know, that sparked another conversation. And so we have this whole crowd now talking about this. And before you know it, time's flying by and my number gets called. And I walk up there, and usually the people working there aren't known for their like charming personality, right? And I said, wow, you don't have any idea how excited I am to see you. And she's like, really? Why? I said, do you know how long I've been waiting? She goes, a long time. I showed her my watch, and my watch at the time just said now. It was just it didn't even tell time. It was just a watch that said now. It was a fun accessory. And she laughed and said, ladies, you got to come see this. And so before you knew it, I was witnessing like this laughter and smiles, like a domino effect to the people that were receptive into it. And so, if we're going to be in the closest place to hell, we might as well share some laughs and some smiles. And I had the best time there, and got my license, left there in a breeze, which was huge contrast to my previous experiences of going there, waiting for hours, and everybody's in a bad mood. And so that's the power of this simple practice and technique, and you can use it right when you wake up in the morning to have the best day.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, no, and our DM, the equivalent of our DMVs here, they're not as bad as yours. And I have heard other people from the US talk about there's just this little institution you guys have, and yeah, I mean, we wouldn't enjoy going to ours, but it's not as bad.
You can choose to, it's like if we find ourselves in hell, let's throw a party while we're moving through there.
Exactly. Yeah, take your own energy in, and instead of absorbing their energy, I'm taking my energy in, and other people and I'm going to take enough of it that everyone around is going to absorb my energy.
Yeah. Game changer.
Lighten and brighten the day. When we spoke, nearly a week ago, something I asked you then that I'd like you to talk about is anxiety and intuition. Both of them send messages to us. So I'd like to hear from you on how our listeners can tell the difference. And for me, it's obvious, but I know there are some people out there, because if you do a Google search for anxiety versus intuition, there's a lot of stuff comes up. There's obviously a lot of people are confused on those two. So if you wouldn't mind giving us your slant on how you see the big difference between the two of them.
Big difference. And it's for everybody, they can experience their intuition differently, right? Some people, like for me, it's more of a feeling, like the kind of like the hairs stick up on your skin, or it's like this gut feeling. For me, it usually starts in my second chakra, my gut. It's kind of this, like the first brain is gives me a hit of energy. It's kind of like, ooh, that's a high excitement, right? And so what's interesting is that, anxiety is based on that word. Every word has a charge, right? So based on our previous experience of that. So that word gets pretty bad rap because it can feel like nails on a chalkboard, just the A word itself, right? And so if we really break it down to just a somatic experience, right, they're actually pretty similar. It's like excitement, you get the sweaty armpits, palms, there's increase in heart rate. So the physiological responses, and the sensory input is very similar from excitement to anxiety, but one's considered good and one's considered bad, right? So, zooming out a little bit further, remembering that we're actually the meaning makers of these words that we're using, and the words we choose to use and the thoughts we identify with are creating our reality in real time. So, for me, anxiety was something that I avoided for quite some time. And it was like this underlying, kind of uneasiness, or this like nervous feeling that would kind of hit my whole nervous system. And I felt like I had to hide it. It was like such an uncomfortable feeling that I got good at just like being incongruent with how I was feeling inside versus how I was expressing outwardly. And I got good at hiding anxiety until it started getting more and more intense. And eventually one day, I instead of avoiding, anxiety is oftentimes fear, avoidance, and just not trusting in the flow of life, right? So I decided, this is getting out of control. It's starting to come up in social situations. I would feel it before I go on stage, of course, but same thing. It was like an excitement, and then there's anxiety, which is like gets me in my head, and then it's hard to access my heart and speak from that space. And so I think a lot of people can relate to that nervousness, that sensation of uncomfortable feeling of anxiety. And yet when I chose to finally let it in, instead of avoiding it, finding all these, I'll just numb it out with something in the fridge, or, you know, call a friend or whatever. It was like, no, let me really sit with this, because anxiety is energy, and energy is information. And so there's some important information that this has to share with me. And as soon as I invited it in, it was like having anxiety, like a sit down with this messenger, right? And as I sat with it, yes, it was very uncomfortable. But the more I sat, it was like, wow, this is like an old friend that had been knocking on my door very loud with an important message for me. I just kept avoiding answering the door. And now that I have, it was like, whoa, of course, anxiety was showing me my biggest fear, like right smack in my face. And I thought it'd maybe be like embarrassment or looking stupid, or, being exiled, or, these silly fears are very minor compared to a much larger superseding fear, which is deathbed regrets. Knowing that this life is temporary, and I've been, with some loved ones to help them transfer on to the next life. And so being that close to death has really enhanced my visceral experience to fully live life. And confronting that was a game changer for me, because recognizing, wow, like I only have so much time to share my God-given gifts, to share the messages on my heart, to share that, programs that want to come through that can help a lot of people, and share more smiles for miles, and laughter, and if I choose fear and try keep avoiding that and playing small and allowing that worry of like, oh, well, I look stupid, or oh, if I express myself too much, boy, I'll get judged, right? Like that would be a shame if I got to the end of my life and didn't create everything I came here to create, because I chose fear instead of spreading that love. And so that was a huge realization for me, because it helped me. It was like a healthy fear underneath anxiety was showing me like, hey, this can fuel your fire. It was a catalyst for recognizing, man, how often do I set aside this much time to sit with myself and actually enjoy my own company, and I've gone through the depths of the uncomfortable feelings, and now it's alchemized into this fire that's inspiring me to create more. And that's what inspired the laser focus method, one of my early group trainings. When the whole pandemic hit, it was like, what do people need right now? And I tuned in, and it was like, man, we're giving our attention to all these sources of information that may not be in our best interest. And so what can we use our greatest asset, our attention and our energy, towards something that can create a better world. And that's why the laser focus method is a game changer, because it helps you cut through the distractions and get to create more than you're consuming. And in doing that, that's the path to long-term fulfillment. Whether it's guitar playing or writing or your God-given gifts, you're choosing to share more of that and then help other people on their journey too. And it's really fun because you get to gamify your get-to-do list and access more flow states. And so it's become a really popular, online training sense. And it's helped people create more, so that they don't have to have deathbed regrets, so that they can die happy, knowing that, yeah, I did everything I came to do in this human experience, before saying bye-bye on to the next. And so that has been my relationship with anxiety. And I'm human, so I still feel it, but not the same. I never feels the same after. It's more of like a friendly little knock at the door. Hey, just checking in to remind you, you've been consuming a lot more than you're creating lately. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. It's time to get back into creating. And I'll grab my magic handpan drum and start playing, or just create something fun, that's inspiring, and it goes away. And so it's a very valuable messenger. And I feel like, all that to say that intuition is in that same realm. It's some people feel it as an experience, right? It's like an excitement. So it's like the universe leaving you gluten-free breadcrumbs on your path of fulfillment, purpose, and highest excitement. And so you can tune into that in the moment. What would be most exciting to me right now? And it might be, man, just going for a bike ride, right? And well, that's not going to change the world, right? And well, it might, if you go on that ride and then that raises your vibration, fills your cup, and then the next person that you interact with, you've just tuned into a higher frequency, you chose a better station, right, than the old negative program, and you just smiled at somebody, and that has the power to spark and catalyze a new friendship. And then maybe that friendship is like leads to a new business idea, which can then help and impact a lot of lives. So that's how fast these things can happen when you listen to your intuition. And we'll get very esoteric if you want. If you zoom out, intuition, it's like when we're praying, we're talking to God, universe, power, source, right? And when we're listening to our intuition, that's God speaking to us, right? So it's like when we listen to that, every time you honor it and take that inspired action step, you are improving your relationship with your intuition and higher power. And that gets to be really exciting.
Yeah. So the anxiety versus intuition. So what the message in there that I'm hearing is that anxiety can be a type of intuition that maybe it's just like the pain example we gave a little while ago. We've let things get a bit far. We haven't been listening to that still small voice that's gently trying to use the feather to get our attention. Sometimes we've picked up the lenses too many days in a row that we're not looking out so well, and we're like, oh, that thing is going to get me, bother me, make me, embarrass me, make me ostracize me, and I'm anxious. Yeah. And if we can change those lenses, see it a different way, like you said, and you sat in that anxiety, which would be bloody uncomfortable, like that, it would not initially seem like an enjoyable thing to do, but
it's really uncomfortable, temporary,
yes,
right? And if you can sit with it until the uncomfortableness dissolves and turns into something else, then it's literally like you're shifting, that energy is able to disperse and dissolve. Whereas we're usually doing the opposite, which is avoidance. Get away from this pain. And then it stays stuck as issues in our tissues. And then all our greatest teachers, the guy that cuts you off on the road, that's able to piss you off, or your family that knows how to push your buttons, they're those triggers are gateways to deeper healing. But oftentimes we're just taught and used to avoiding that because it's uncomfortable. So this is an opportunity to understand that anxiety, anger, grief, these are all, it's energy, and energy is information. And that information is here to share something with us, and then it can move through us. It's like, it's like when you get good at this, you realize, man, if I feel like I've just been carrying around a ton of bricks, like all this weight and this luggage and this, I call it 3D debris. It's like that three-dimensional realm where here we are in Contrastville, where we get to experience heaviness, lightness, dark, light, pleasure, pain. We don't get to experience that outside of these sensory suits, where we come from. And so what an honor to get to be in this epic school, of life. And love is the lesson. We can either choose love or fear in every moment. And so when you keep choosing love, then you can love even the uncomfortable feelings and say, what are you here to share with me? Right? Like with anxiety, it's like, what are you avoiding in your life? Right? It might be like, man, I know there's this TED talk in me, and I've just not taken the next step to, apply or do the thing, right? Well, that's going to build up inside of you. And then your so-called comfort zone gets very uncomfortable, because your soul came here for much more than survival, came here to thrive and share all these God-given gifts in your own unique vibration that nobody else has, that can help impact and influence and improve a lot of lives. So that will just keep showing up until we actually sit with it and have a process for resolving it and metabolizing that energy. And it's like putting down all that luggage that's so heavy, the 3D debris, opening it up and saying, oh, this is all I needed. There's my biggest fear. Now I'm not as afraid of it. It's actually a friend, because now it's catalyzing all this inspired action so that I can die happy. Right. And then I can leave the rest of the luggage behind, and I feel so much lighter. And so I appreciate anxiety, and it's been a great teacher, much like pain.
So for someone who's listening and saying, okay, I'm hearing you, Charles, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I have avoided anxiety at all costs my whole life. What would it be like for that person on their first time, where they've got some alone time and they're like, how do they start that process to these, very
Yeah,
basics?
great question. So I always recommend using one of the greatest tools that's right under our nose the whole time, the power of breath. Right. So anytime you're hit with, your nervous system gets shocked, rattled, feeling anxiety, just slow things down with the power of your breath. And I teach a 4-8 expansion breath and guide people through a whole experience of it. But the gist of it is, if you breathe in for 4 seconds and expand in every direction from your belly outward to your heart like a balloon, and then you exhale for 8 seconds. So slow, smooth, like a release valve, letting go all the way to empty. And you keep repeating that. This has the power to calm your nervous system and to slow things down. It's like downshifting a couple gears. And then you can see what's present at a little bit subtler level, right? It might not be quite as scary, or it's just a great tool for finding the eye of any storm that you're caught in. Instead of being in the emotional storm, you can witness it from this place and slow things down a little bit. And then notice where the A word's showing up. Where is anxiety? Where do I feel it in my body? Is it like in my heart? Is my heart beating like a drum? Or is it like feel like constriction in my throat? Or is it all like up here, just feels like my mind's gonna explode? And notice, where that's showing up in your body, and then bring your awareness there. And you can begin with that self-inquiry, right? How is this happening for me? What wants to change? And what are the lessons and blessings to gain from this? And then you might find a little more courage to sit with it longer than you have before. And that's where, that saying, the treasures that you seek are in the cave that you fear the most. Right. So by taking that inward journey and sitting even just a little bit deeper or longer with that uncomfortable feeling, with this tool for an expansion breath to slow things down, you might learn something very important about yourself and notice that it's actually all happening for you. Yes, it can be scary. Yes, it can be intense. And it's only temporary. Right. So if we can sit with it. And then the second tool I recommend is based on this principle, which Alan Watts shared. If you think about your thoughts, then your whole life opens up, right? So this is a great quote from one of my favorite. Alan Watts is amazing, and he's left behind just so much gold. And that quote, in order to think about your thoughts, it requires slowing things down. Because if we have a racing mind, then we're just identifying with all the thoughts and going into the old negative programs again, creating the same results, same painful situations. Whereas if you can, find a space, like I love surfing. So I imagine it's like I paddled out past the breaker and I'm sitting on my surfboard and it's a perfect sunny day, and I get to watch each wave come in and form, right? And each wave is a thought, recognizing like that's not me. Those aren't my thoughts. Those are simply, it's energy like waves that are coming through. And I can drop in and surf that negative thought if I want, or pull out if I recognize it, right? But the example would be like, we talked about age before this. And, I used to have the negative program of every time I look in the mirror in the morning, first thing, it was like I was scanning and looking for flaws. So I was like, where's the imperfection? Oh, my hair's messed up. Oh, I'm getting another gray hair here. Right. It was like this. And then I caught myself. I like came back to that seat of awareness on the surfboard, just watching my thoughts. And I'm like, man, those are some silly thoughts, waves that I'm riding. Why don't I wait for some better waves? Right. And that's when everything changed, because it was like getting rid of this, letting go of this old Windows 2007 software that I, uploaded a long time ago that's no longer serving me, of looking for negative features or things. And I'm like, gray hair, that's a sign of sophistication. That's a sign of wisdom. It looks nice with a little salt and pepper. It worked for Sean Connery, right? So that wave feels a lot better in my system when I bring a little levity to it and choose those thoughts to ride. Then I'm like at one with nature, getting barreled by a wave and feel really good and come out the other side like, yes. And then there's more waves like that, right? Whereas when we get caught and then keep riding negative waves and identifying with those, it's like wave after negative wave after negative wave. We feel like we're just getting pummeled and drowning, right? So the beautiful part is that we can choose and practice just come to the seat of awareness and just observing thoughts as they go by. Oh, I see that one. Yeah. Oh, I recognize that. Oh, I used to identify with that one, and just let them go by, instead of trying to be on the shore, like stopping waves. I always think it's funny when people are like, yeah, you just empty your mind and you stop thinking when you meditate. We're like, well, the mind's made to think. So, if you get good at observing, then it might be a little more effective instead of trying to stop waves from coming. Because what happens when you do that at the beach, right? It's the same thing. That energy is going to move. So that has been a game changer. And the more you practice it, the better you can get. And then you can find, the eye of the storm as all the chaos is going around and things seem out of order or out of sorts and it's getting intense. Remembering when you zoom out, like, wow, life is a series of order and chaos. Order and chaos. And one is always leading into the next, right? Just like dark and light. It's like contraction and expansion, right? So if we've just been conditioned and taught that order is good, but we're the meaning makers. So why can't chaos be good too? because that's what leads to order, right? So if you get good at practicing, like a nervous system dojo, practicing your breathing and finding that seat of awareness in the storms and in the chaos, then you can get very comfortable with being uncomfortable. And then life just feels like a breeze when you see it through that lens, you know?
Mhm.
And so I choose very wisely the lens at which I'm seeing through. If there's some anger that's coming up, I have a process. I'll take it through my own medicine, the same thing I teach, my inner peace process, to see like it's not avoiding. It's not like, oh, just, anger's coming up like a volcano and you can try to avoid it and be like, oh, I'm just going to choose positive thoughts, just going to choose positive, just stay positive, right? I used to do that, but like there's still this volcanic energy that's going to flow, right? And what is it? What happens? We end up projecting it on the ones we love or strangers or whatever, unintentionally, of course. But like we're short, we're snappy, we're barking at somebody for over something small, and this is the expression of anger when it hasn't been processed or it's repressed. And so I've improved my relationship with anger by sitting with that one and recognizing, wow, what a powerful primal energy that's amazing for declaring boundaries, for declaring what I'm no longer willing to tolerate, you know, and this primal force that allows me to protect, my family if I need to, and know that I have that, can access that if I need to. And that's why, some of the best warriors and like martial arts and like Bruce Lee, they he's one of the most peaceful guys. Because if you can channel anger, primal energy like that into protection and needing to protect yourself or defend yourself, then it's rare that you need to use it, but it's great for peace of mind, right?
Absolutely. I remember when I was about 8 or 9, his movies came out, and we used to go on Saturday morning to the cinema, the matinee in the morning, and we'd get 2 Bruce Lee movies, and it's all we would talk about at school the next week, because there was no VCRs or video, anything like that. If you didn't see it at the cinema or you didn't see it on TV when it was on, you missed it. And Bruce Lee was the guy. Yeah.
Oh, such a legend. I love his quote, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener at war, right? So
Yep.
being prepared, that's why use life as a dojo. It's a training, right? Like whatever you love the most, like your highest excitement, can you reach a level of mastery, right? And there's no escaping. To reach a level of mastery, it requires reps, like consistent, dedicated focus over and over and over again. There's no shortcut around that. There's no, it's so, yeah, he's such an inspiration and still lives on as such a legend,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. In the intro, you talked about you help people with childhood trauma. And I have heard quite a few of your other podcasts, and you talk in there about childhood trauma and addictions. Would you mind sharing with the listeners how those two tie in together?
Yes, it's a great question because there are with addictions, which, everybody, if you tune in and you're honest with yourself, there's like addictions, vices. These are usually the things that we're resorting to when we feel uncomfortable, right? So it's usually the first line of avoidance, right? So underneath each addiction or vice, there's usually a feeling or something that's gone unaddressed. That's still, there's some lessons and blessings to learn there, right? And I love sharing with experiential learning, so I can share, my personal story and a lot of clients that I've worked with, just using the example of grief. I used to smoke cannabis a lot, and that relationship became quite unhealthy. I recognized like I was getting really lazy and I was unmotivated, and I was in denial for quite some time. Like, no, this serves me, it's great. And denial is not just a river in Egypt. So when we get real honest with ourselves, then we can recognize, wow, I'm overusing this and it's not serving me at this point, right? So that my relationship with it is out of balance. So then I chose to take space from it. And I did so very intelligently, using a method now that I share, help people with addictions and vices. And it's a very strategic way that allows you to actually build more trust, more self-trust, build more confidence, and build more integrity as you're taking space from this substance. And when you do, whatever it is you were avoiding will likely come up, like that volcanic energy, right? And that's an opportunity for deeper healing. That's an opportunity to sit with it. And another great tool is to be able to write it down, right? It's like a great way to think about our own thoughts, like Alan Watts was talking about, to open up our whole life, is by slowing it down with your breath, and then get out your journal and write what it is you're experiencing, because then you get to see your words from a different perspective, right? And it becomes like, instead of something you're holding and hiding inside of you, you can get it out and onto paper where you can see it from a different perspective and think about those thoughts. And so that can be a very helpful tool as well when we're in uncomfortable experiences. And that's why I use it with the inner peace process as well. And in my experience, it was the reason that I was smoking cannabis was because I was avoiding grief, right? I had lost my mom at a young age, and I didn't fully process that whole experience. I was avoided the anger, avoided the grief, and so we don't get to outrun that. That's that those unprocessed emotions are energy that want to be in motion and move through you. But if it's stuck as issues in our tissues, it'll show up as pain, aches, tightness. Uh, it'll just keep getting poked and prodded by, your fellow human, your teachers. And those triggers are the gateway to deeper healing when we have a process like this. And so for me, it was not allowing myself to fully feel grief. And when I did and sat with that uncomfortable feeling, it was like, wow, I found gold there. I was like, what a beautiful emotion. We've just been taught that like an ugly cry is this thing that you should go run into the room and be isolated and don't let anybody see you because, crying's bad, and all the silly beliefs that we pick up. And yet, when I finally allowed those tears to fall, and it comes in layers, it was like this immense lightness and weight lifted off of me, and incredible clarity. My vision and my path forward from there. I was like, man, why was I carrying that for so long? And the fascinating thing is, when I allowed myself to sit through and take it through this inner peace process, I didn't have the same magnetism to cannabis, to marijuana. It didn't have the same grip on me. It was like pointing to, the medicine was showing me like, hey, you're getting on this relationship's getting out of control because there's something you haven't addressed here. And when I addressed the grief, we even know in Chinese medicine, lungs represent grief, the emotion of grief, just like kidneys in the back, low back, represent fear. So that can be related with anxiety. And so this is how intelligent the body is, and it's always giving us signals and messages, whether we're listening or not. The more we listen and understand those messages, the easier life gets when we honor that.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Let me see what we've got. And smoking and grief, that was one that I had heard you talk about before, and I was kind of curious there, and you just brought it up. So smoking, we're taking that smoke into it, which is an energy. We're taking that into our lungs, and so we're trying to mask the grief. Would that be it?
Right. So it's like a coping mechanism. It's like, oh, I'm feeling this uncomfortable grief coming up. I don't like that. I don't want to feel that. So instead, it's like, what will make me feel better? Oh, a smoke calms my nerves. Oh, that feels better. You're right. So it's like this short-term solution, but it's outside of us.
So
So
we're looking for an energy shift with the cigarette smoke is changing the energy in our body. I mean, it's having a physical effect, but it's also, there's an energetic effect, and it's masking that energetic pain of the grief.
Yeah. And then over time, the more you smoke, it has a diminishing effect, right? So it's like I need to smoke even more now to feel better. Or, it's like a diminishing return from, the initial few times that you try it. So for me, zooming out, everything is about relationships, right? So when we need something outside of us, and this is what our society has conditioned us, that anytime you're feeling pain or all these things, it's like, go to the doctor who's trained to prescribe you pharmaceuticals, legalized drugs. Those drugs have side effects. Right? And yet you are your own greatest healer. And nobody, not even the doctors, nobody knows your body and your soul like you. So when, instead of going outward looking for answers, typing it in Google, you're, self-diagnosing, I might have a aneurysm or blah, 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 right? That perpetuates the anxiety, makes things amplified even worse. There's easier ways to go inward, and an inner peace process to help you gain the lessons and blessings as to answers to how this is happening for you. And that is profound, because then you have less need for all the external stuff, and you get good at going inward when challenges arise. And boy, when you finally process grief or anger, then you're not carrying that charge, and you can be fully present when you sit and have tea with somebody, or you go visit your mom or whatever. Then you're not carrying this extra 3D debris, this weight that's so distracting. And then you show up with a new level of presence and, greater understanding and listening that allows for some really rich memories to be, embodied in full, vivid HD, when you show up in that level of presence. So the benefits are across the board. I've been very fortunate to share this same system and help a lot of people with quitting smoking, with cannabis, with, even there's all kinds of different addictions, right? Like one of the biggest ones is our phones now, right? So how can we improve that relationship? And sometimes that involves taking space. So you can use this simple system that provides healthy rewards for your brain, so that you're accessing the natural pharmacopoeia that's already within us. The serotonin, the dopamine, the oxytocin, we can access that natural ways without needing these external things to feel better. And that's a game changer, because then, you're tapping into your own pharmacy. You get high on a regular basis from your own supply without needing, all these different medicines. And that's very empowering for a lot of people. And then recognizing, wow, I don't even need that anymore. That substance or that thing that I used to feel like I had such a needed that to feel better, or that you relied on when things got uncomfortable. Instead, it's like, I can sit with being uncomfortable to see what's here, and it's only temporary. And then on the other side, there's a great quote: any emotion that's felt all the way through is bliss. Right? Wow. It's like when we can feel it all the way through, let it fully move through our system, you come back to bliss, like your natural state of peace, of joy.
So it mightn't start as bliss, but if we do follow it all the way through, it'll become bliss.
Oh, totally. That's one of the first things I found when I, began going inward and going into some of these uncomfortable emotions like grief. I recognized, like, I considered myself a joyous person, right? But I had a ceiling. It was like a glass ceiling of the amount of joy I could experience. And I was like kind of topped out here. And then as soon as I was courageous enough to go deeper into the depths of grief and sadness and allow those tears to fall and, have an ugly cry, not only did I go deeper in those depths, but that opened up like a whole new level of joy, of pleasure, of bliss that I could experience on the other end of that. And so it's increasing your whole capacity for your experience of life.
Yeah. You shared before about get high on your own supply. A couple of years ago, one of my sons bought me a T-shirt. Not where it's a Wim Hof one, like, and as
Yeah.
most mornings I do my, forced inhales and breath holds, and then I ended off with his little push-up method, which just blew me away when I first tried that, because I was capable of like 5 to 10 push-ups when I first started doing that, and then doing it with, after the breathing and the full exhale and holding your breath, and then all of a sudden I just doubled it instantly, and now I've built it up, like, for me,
Yeah.
like pretty seriously, and I'm like, yeah, it's a really cool thing to do. Yeah, very cool.
What a great tool. And your, air, oxygen, life force energy, lungs, right? Your ability to bring in more life to your experience. It's like, the more you enhance that and train for that, then you keep feeling more and more fully alive,
Mm,
you know.
yeah.
So yeah, thank God for Wim Hof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he's got a, doesn't put on too many airs and graces. He just tells it how it is, and you get into it. Yeah, I love it. Love it. So we talked about the lungs and smoking and that sort of thing. Are there any other addictions, with emotional connections, or medical symptoms with emotional issues that you can just think of off the top of your head that would be interesting for the listeners?
Well, an interesting one is a lot of people in our society in the US is an addiction is doing, right? Like working.
Mm,
There's just workaholics, doers, and this is, for a number of different reasons, but in general, it's like early on, you get this badge of validation and appreciation if you're a hard worker and you're just working to the bone and like on borderline burnout, but at least you're busy. How you doing? I'm busy, really busy. It's like this accolade that we carry as like this, it's this external validation that we get from that can be pretty sneaky into our lives and takes us further away from remembering the power of like feminine energy, of just being, of just relaxing, of restorative work, of just being receptive, right? So that all that doing and that output that you've been doing wants to come back to you in beautiful ways too. But if you're so busy doing, you're not receptive and you can miss it. So a lot of ROIs out there that still want to come to people, but they're too busy doing to fully receive it. So there's a balance between that. And that's the beautiful dance within each of us of masculine and feminine energy.
yeah. Okay. So I've got a question for you now. I haven't heard anyone else ask you, but I'm just curious. What's your biggest fear?
Yeah, it used to be, first it was public speaking. And it was funny because I looked that up and recognized like there was a stat that, more people fear public speaking more than death, which is like, wow, more people would rather be in the coffin than giving the sermon, the eulogy is like, so that baffled me. And I was like, well, I'm supposed to go towards that then. And again, it was like getting my reps in. And I don't consider myself like a master of that speaking yet, but it certainly is a lot more fun and I feel more excitement. And I still feel, anxiety or some of the nervousness. But again, it's like, as long as I can drop from my mind into my heart space and just share from there, then, let the fun begin. And so it's the more we practice that, the better it gets. So that's no longer a fear. And then, like I mentioned, the one I discovered from anxiety, which was death, fearing death. That one's an interesting one because I've been so close to death that of some loved ones that I've seen, that powerful transformation. And it's allows me to like really live a rich life, being that close to death. And I don't necessarily fear it, but I know my time isn't up anytime soon. I have a lot more to do in this life, and I have two young, beautiful girls. So I just feel like there's a lot of life left in me. And it is interesting to kind of tune into what level of choice we have as a soul in that, how long we're here for in these human bodies. And it's a fun way to go to spark some interest there. But so now it would be like, if anything were to happen to my girls, you know, that's my biggest fear. And so I always think of, instead of going down that rabbit hole, because I feel that, where we put our attention is where our energy is going. And so if we're worrying, then we're just praying for what we don't want. And it increases the chances of that happening. So instead, I'm cool. I can prepare like Bruce Lee. It's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener at war. So I just prepare logically and then, stay on my toes, Jedi training to make sure they're staying safe. And then I don't worry too much about that.
Yeah. Great advice. So I'm curious, and you may not see life like this at all, but I'm just curious, do you see this life that we're living as a kind of game that we've forgotten that we're playing?
Yes. Yeah. Can be considered a simulation of sorts. I feel like, it's the ultimate school because, like I mentioned earlier, when we are pure energy, and I've experienced this through, certain plant medicines and certain experiences have showed me what that's like outside of our bodies and home as energy. And it's beautiful. It's bliss. It's like it's timelessness. And so coming into this level of density, I call it contrastville here on earth, where we get to experience pain and thus pleasure, dark and then light. This is the forefront of, the most learning as a soul. We talk about knowing thyself. That's why I feel like there's so many incredible souls that are excited to come back into this human experience to feel what we can feel here, in these epic sensory suits. So I feel like we're on the cutting edge of the expansion of consciousness here.
And I'm with you that this is a game. What do you think is the purpose of the game? Like what's it? Why?
Yeah. Well, to know thyself, right? If you were, like Alan Watts said it so elegantly, if you dreamt you had a dream every night of like the most incredible adventures and amazing experiences, and you're like, wow, that was fun, but like what's next? And so we're like, well, maybe I'd make it even closer, and yeah, closer shave, like a quick, wow, that barely got out of that one in time, right? And it gets more exciting, more close calls, and then until the point where you realize, wow, here we are in this dream within a dream. And so it's fascinating. I find it, that there's just so much to learn and so much that we don't know, that and what a great place to learn with all these beautiful mirrors, all the other souls here courageous enough to come into the human experience and have their own diverse perspective that they bring to the collective, and so I'm very optimistic for humanity, even despite, all the things going on in the world. I feel like we've seen a lot of contrast of, organizations, corporations, things that haven't been working very well. And I feel like it's time. Thank you for the contrast. Let's create something better, and then enough people move to that, what we're creating that's better than those old systems and things can die off and new ones can form at a rapid rate. So that's
Yeah.
those are laws of the universe.
We need some new people writing the computer code for the simulation. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Okay.
mean, if you are God, and I'm a full believer that He's within all of us, then if you got bored for a moment, what would you create? What would you do? Like the ultimate game,
Mm,
Earth, and
yeah.
like all the other planets, and so it's yeah, it's fascinating. I feel like there's more than one purpose for this experience for sure. But one of the purposes to learn, to know thyself,
Yeah.
to know more about thyself through as these beautiful mirrors for one another, and to gain even more richness in each experience here.
Yeah. All right. I've got two more questions for you. On another podcast that I was listening to, you told a story about a friend of yours who channeled your dad after he'd passed. And there was a message about a red thing in the garden. Is that a story you'd like to share?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that can tie everything together here too, because I lost my mom early on, and then about 8 or 9 years ago, my dad called me and said, I could tell right when I answered the phone. It's like, man, he's something's going on. And he shared with me, I just left the doctor's office and got some bad news. I said, what did they tell you, Dad? And he said, he was a smoker, and they said he has stage 4 lung cancer. And the doctor gave him like 2 to 4 months to live because it had spread and it's so bad. And I chose my words very wisely. I took a breath and said, Dad, do you want to beat this? Do you want to live? And he said, you're damn right I do. I said, good. Then don't listen to a word those doctors said, because we're going to get you on everything that's already been healing cancer and cutting out the things that have been causing it. And we got him an infrared sauna. We got him on the Gerson Institute protocol, which is juicing and coffee enemas, and like this whole. He became like the ultimate biohacker, and and there was a point when he went to the doctor and came back and shared with us that the cancer was gone. So I mean, it was like this huge roller coaster ride, knowing that, man, his time could be close, and yet he has the power to keep living if he wants, right? And so um, that was gold to me, because I got to share with him everything on my heart, how much he means to me, and then eventually after a couple of years, we turned like 2 months into 2 years when he started going back into smoking his e-cig again, a little more of the sugar and kind of cutting out some of the good stuff. So eventually, it hit him pretty hard, and I would get a call, from my brothers, hey, Dad's, in the hospital, and I'd fly back, roll up my sleeves, and all right, Doc, what do we need to do to get him signed off and out of here? And set my intention before I go in the hospital. I'd go in there like Patch Adams. And so I would get him signed off. We'd go take him out in the sun at the park, get some grounding, get some good high nutritional food. And every smirk, every little smile that he shared was gold, because I didn't know how much longer we'd be with him. And so the last time that my brothers called, I could tell by my brother's voice that it was pretty bad, and he was home with hospice and had by the time I flew in, I saw him, and I was just distraught with the way his body looked. I couldn't believe like how frail. This is like my hero. He's 6'5", strongest man, like just such a epic father. And to see, I was like, man, I'm not here to save him. Like, I'm here to help him transition. And so that really hit me hard. And I remember shortly after that, his friend came over to sing a song on his guitar. And I sat there with my hand on my dad's shoulder. And the song was called Let It Flow. And it was the ugliest cry that I just let out of grief, knowing that I was about to lose my dad, and just snot bubbles and the full expression of grief. And in the depths of that, I found so much beauty. I just found that, wow, like this is the same grief that my dad wasn't able to feel, access, right? Lung cancer, grief. So it was this huge realization. And the fact that I got to express with him how much he means to me through the expression of grief and tears. And it was monumental. It was a really profound experience. And so I held his hand. We all gathered around him, and I could tell he was still with us, but he was in a lot of pain, and he was ready. He was just holding on for us. And I shared with him, Dad, you know, we're always with you, and we love you so much. And where you're going is so peaceful. It's so beautiful. It's, you know, it's it's home. And so it's you don't need to fight anymore. And right after sharing those words, took his last breath. And what a gift to get to be there for him and with him through all that. And it wasn't too long after that I was called to a plant ceremony with some friends, a men's group that I was in, and one of the men in that group has some profound abilities to channel, and he later in the night ended up channeling my father, and I could tell, it was my father's spirit coming through, because he shared with me, that anger, the times that he yelled at me when I was really young. He was like, I couldn't stop it. I tried so hard to not take that out on you, and that just really opened my heart, because I could see like the train of anger, that energy, the thread through his dad was the same expression to him, and my grandpa, my great grandpa, and just this like whole thread that had gone down through the generations. And he tried so hard not to express that outwardly on my brother and I. And I forgave him, of course, but he said, you know, I left something for you in the garden. And this is him speaking to me in spirit through my friend. And I thought, man, the garden, my backyard? Yeah. And he said, you'll know when you find it, because it doesn't belong in the garden. It's a gift for you, and it's under the red in the garden. And I was just like, whoa, what am I going to find there? And he said, when you find it, allow little Charles, like my 5-year-old self, to fully express, anything that you need to, anything you need to tell me or express towards me. And I just found this so fascinating. I was like, man, I'm either like really crazy, or I'm going to find something in the yard back there. So sure enough, the next day I went in, said hi to the girls, went out to the back, and everything was pretty much shriveled up. It was almost winter, and there was one little shriveled up red bell pepper left in the garden. And under that, I'm wiping away all these leaves, and I find this beautiful seashell, like the Fibonacci sequence, just incredible. And I was like, he knows how much I love the ocean. It was just this really powerful connection, and I felt his presence with me, and I let my inner 5-year-old just express. I'm sick of being your anger punching bag. I don't deserve this, and just let it fly. And I didn't care if my neighbors thought I was crazy. I just needed to express, let my little 5-year-old that felt reserved from that expression of anger from my dad, it kind of like shut him down, that part of me. And this was an opportunity to express that and free that. And it was fascinating, because not only did I feel liberated, but I felt like my dad's soul and his spirit like ascend. And it was just fascinating. It was like a deep generational healing that had occurred, and he needed me to express that fully in order to free him to another degree too. It was just so fascinating. So these are some of the things that are hard to explain by science, but it was as real as night and day for me.
Yeah, very, very powerful story. Appreciate you sharing that. Yeah, wow. And as you were talking through there, you might have noticed I got a little emotional. Like my dad moved on 18 months ago. He was 92, and yeah, he'd had enough and wanted to go. And yeah, it's an emotional subject. Yeah. All right. So one last question for you. If your microphone was connected to all 8 billion people on the planet right now, and you knew they wouldn't judge, blame, or shame you for anything you said, what would you say to them?
Just offering everyone a full permission slip for their adult self or all the way down to your inner child to just play full out in this human experience, to not hold back, not let the fears or the judgments, limit your expression. Just offering full permission slip to everybody to play full out while we're here in this exquisite place called Earth, flying through space, surrounding, orbiting a sun, and getting to know each other in this way.
Excellent advice. Excellent. Play full heart. Yeah. Right. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to quickly cover? Or
I mean, just a little glimpse into the work that I've been called to do over the past decade has really been refined to helping people heal their own childhood trauma with an inner peace process that's very effective. I've had clients that have, worked with me for in as little as 8 weeks, have shared that they had more breakthroughs and more transformations than they'd had in 3 years of therapy. And these type of results are across the board because some people find that like more money comes into their experience because they're releasing old limiting beliefs and energy that had been trapped and stuck, trapped emotions in their body that are finally metabolizing through this process, and it opens up a lot of really exciting heart's desires and dreams to come true. And this can be in the form of more intimacy in relationships, attracting in. I've had a lot of clients that have attracted in their king or their queen, and even health. I've worked with women that have done this inner peace process and just shedded so much weight naturally without really changing much else because they realize that they don't need to protect themselves anymore. They're safe here. And so this inner work has been my gift to humanity. And it's, a medicine that I keep taking. I still use this process when I get triggered with uncomfortable feelings. I can either use the mind's band-aid and go to the fridge and stuff it, or I can grab my journal and take it through this step-by-step process and see where it's coming from and allow my body to finally metabolize any energy that's been trapped from that experience, get the opportunity to reparent my younger version of me that was going through something hard, and bring the love, support, and safety to the parts of me that needed it most. So then I have that 5-year-old fully on board, and the imagination and the play and the expression, fully embodied, that allows us to then share more of our God-given gifts, and more of why we came here as a soul and what we came to give. And so it's really simple but effective and profound work, because once people experience it, then I give them clients the take home version of it. So now you have the choice. You can resort to the smoking or the Instagram social scroll holes, or you can heal it not only for yourself but for future generations, your children, and open up a lot of new things into your experience in life. So I can't say enough about this work. It's just been such a gift to get to share it. And so anybody that feels called to that, feel free to reach out. While I have space available, I'm offering, free 15-minute support call for those that feel interested and want to learn more. We can see exactly where you're at, where you want to go, what's in the way, and help you gain some traction on that path and some clarity.
Yeah, excellent. So the link to that will be in the show notes. And you did mention that you have a free gift as well if people sign up for your newsletter. And what's that gift?
Yeah, so go to charlesclay.coach, and then when you scroll to the bottom, just subscribe, and you'll hear all the latest and greatest that we're offering. My wife and I, both live VIP retreats and online programs. But the first thing you'll get is this gift of alignment, and it's a guided alignment activation. It's a combination, a special sequence of movement, breath work, and visualization that allows you to really come back and reclaim your full sovereign chi. I call it. It's like filling up with your own life force energy so that there's no room for anything else. And then you get to create from inspired action from that place. And it's really exciting. It's great for good morning ritual. It's great for anytime you're feeling off or your energy, just you feel in a funk. You can use this practice to help you choose a higher frequency.
Excellent. I just want to go back to something you were talking about there a minute ago, where you mentioned that people can experience, without even trying to do it, but they can experience weight loss. And you're talking about finally they feel safe. And what I took from that is, are people putting the weight on as a protective device to have like a larger barrier to protect them? Is that it?
Right. So a lot of times with this work, I've discovered, everybody's journey is different, but there are some common denominators that a lot of people experience. And oftentimes weight, extra weight, like an extra layer of fat, is a younger part of us that went through something challenging, made some decisions, right? That, wow, I'm not safe here, and that I need to protect myself, right? And then that limiting belief keeps perpetuating and showing up in the subconscious. And it's like the reticular activation's unintentionally set to that. So then we're looking for all the ways that we're not safe on earth in this human experience. And we'll find evidence of that, right? And especially if you watch the news. And so what's great is through this inner peace process, you can identify where those limiting beliefs were created. Those were decisions that we made about ourselves early on, trying to go through something challenging, and you get to rewrite that story and pull those negative beliefs like weeds. And that creates a huge shift and allows people to lose, weight rapidly, or improve health, and even like so-called incurable diseases they've been able to heal from using this work.
Yeah, it's truly amazing when you start to get into the energetic system. I just love the unseen realm. There's things that just happen and occur, and we see things happen and occur all the time, like the opposite of what we want. But if suddenly something happens, like, you change, you have a checkup from the neck up, your attitude towards life, you put the different lenses on, and next thing, your body's starting to shed weight, and they're like, what are you doing? Well, I'm not sure. I just picked these different, I had those contact lenses for a while. Now I'm putting these ones on, and I see the world differently. And it all didn't happen in 2 days, but in 2 to 3 months, someone's lost 10 pounds or whatever, and they haven't changed. They're not exercising more. They're not eating differently, or maybe they are eating a little differently, like, just intuitively, they're just feeling like different, and life's better. Yeah. Wow. And it's not just the different lens making them look skinny or fat, like at the show, like the House of Mirrors sort of thing, the fat mirror, the skinny mirror. It's not just that. Yeah, no, that's powerful information, Charles. And I want to thank you so much. We're really reaching out to men here, but I know there's ladies listening in too, and it doesn't matter who you are. There's some serious nuggets of gold in everything you've said, and I thank you so much for sharing today. And I know that people are going to be clearer about their intuition and what's happening. That PAIN acronym, pay attention inward now. The anxiety is a higher level of intuition because we weren't listening earlier. And same with the pain. Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. And to everyone listening, charlesclay.coach, not .com, .coach. Check out his site, check out his info. You're on Instagram, aren't you?
Those on Instagram, go to charlesclay.coach. Shoot me a DM if you want to dive deeper on any of this. Like I said, while there's space available, I'm offering the listeners free support calls. And I'm happy to connect. This is, been an honor to get to share this. So I appreciate this conversation and appreciate what you do, Doug, and look forward to connecting more.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't hesitate. Don't get dumped in the surf like I did. Just make the call. All right. Thanks, Charles.
Peace.
Bye.
Well, we're at the end of another thought-provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever-reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition. It will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.